Saturday mornings once promised magic, bright colors, zany voices, and worlds where anything was possible. But for every cartoon that became a legend, dozens quietly faded into the vaults of forgotten television. What went wrong? Why did some shows fail to spark joy in children's hearts? Today, we'll revisit 15 Saturday morning cartoons that completely flopped and uncover the strange reasons they disappeared. Rubik, the Amazing Cube, 1983. When Rubik, the Amazing Cube first appeared on ABC, network executives thought they had struck gold. The Rubik's Cube had become an international sensation, a puzzle toy that had sold tens of millions of units worldwide. Kids everywhere were twisting the little colored cube, racing to solve it. So naturally, a cartoon spin-off seemed like a guaranteed hit, but the execution was bizarre. The show featured Rubik as a floating magical cube with googly eyes, a squeaky voice, and supernatural powers. His gimmick? He only came alive when solved. That meant entire episodes revolved around kids frantically twisting a cube while a villain loomed in the background. It was less thrilling adventure and more half-hour toy commercial. Critics immediately panned it as shameless product placement. The Los Angeles Times dismissed it as soulless merchandising disguised as entertainment, while parents wondered why their kid's favorite puzzle was suddenly a sentient sidekick. Even Rubik's bouncy theme song, performed by Menudo, then a rising Latin pop sensation, couldn't save it. Behind the scenes, writers struggled to stretch the thin concept into plots. The show leaned heavily on recycled tropes, bumbling villains, generic chase scenes, and morality lessons tacked on at the end. Kids, far savvier than advertisers expected, tuned out quickly. The show vanished after a single season, never to be revived. Today, it stands as a cautionary tale of corporate overreach, proof that even the most beloved toy can't carry a story without genuine heart. The cube endured as a timeless puzzle, its cartoon counterpart dissolved into obscurity. Mr. T, 1983 to 1986. In the early 80s, Mr. T was everywhere, an unstoppable force of charisma with his gold chains, mohawk, and gravelly catchphrases. NBC executives believed his popularity from the A-Team would translate perfectly into Saturday morning glory. Thus Mr. T was born, a cartoon where the tough guy coached a traveling team of teenage gymnasts who solved mysteries on the side. On paper, it sounded fun. In practice, it was odd. Each episode followed the same formula. A theft or crime occurred, the kids stumbled onto clues, and Mr. T swooped in with advice and muscle. But instead of the grit fans loved, the show delivered watered-down lectures on teamwork, safety, and morality. "I pity the fool who doesn't brush his teeth" became less a catchphrase and more a running joke. The production was rushed to capitalize on Mr. T's skyrocketing. Fame animators recycled footage to save money, resulting in stiff, repetitive action sequences. Critics noted how little sense the show made. Why would an international gymnastics team moonlight as detectives? Audiences initially tuned in out of curiosity, but ratings plummeted as kids realized it wasn't nearly as tough or cool as the real Mr. T. Behind the scenes, NBC forced writers to keep stories squeaky clean, stripping away any edge. Even Mr. T himself grew frustrated, though he gamely recorded PSA-style monologues at the end of each episode. By 1986, the network quietly pulled the plug. Its legacy? A strange curiosity that resurfaces whenever fans discuss the oddest celebrity-driven cartoons. Mr. T's larger-than-life persona remains legendary, but his cartoon proved that charisma alone can't sustain a show without a solid concept. Turbo Teen, 1984. Of all the failed cartoons of the 80s, Turbo Teen may be the most infamous. The premise was jaw-droppingly weird. A teenage boy, Brett Matthews, merges with his sports car after a freak government experiment. Whenever he gets hot, say in the sun or during exercise, he morphs into a talking red sports car. To change back, he must cool down. Writers envisioned the show as a hybrid of Knight Rider and superhero comics. What they created instead was nightmare fuel. The transformation scenes showed Brett's body stretching and warping into chrome, headlights bursting from his face, arms twisting into fenders. Instead of thrilling, kids found it disturbing. Parents wrote letters complaining that the sequences frightened their children. Plot lines didn't help. Each week, Brett and his friends used his bizarre power to chase criminals, escape government agents, or save innocents in peril. But the villains were generic, the action formulaic, and the novelty wore off quickly. Critics hammered the show for taking itself too seriously, despite its absurd premise. Behind the scenes, production costs ballooned because animating transformations was resource-intensive. Writers scrambled to keep stories fresh but ran out of ideas after only 13 episodes. By the end of its single season, Turbo Teen was already being mocked in entertainment magazines as one of the strangest Saturday morning failures of all time. Decades later, the show found new life as an internet punchline, with clips circulating widely as examples of cartoon excess. Instead of inspiring awe, it became a cult oddity, proof that some concepts are simply too bizarre to ever succeed. In the end, Turbo Teen is remembered less for its stories and more as a cautionary tale about ideas gone off the rails. Great, let's keep building this out. Here's Part 2, covering entries 4 to 6, each expanded to 350 to 450 words, with behind-the-scenes context, criticism, and legacy. The Gary Coleman Show, 1982. By the early 80s, Gary Coleman was one of the biggest child stars in America. His sitcom, Different Strokes, drew millions of viewers, and his signature catchphrase, "What you talking about, Willis?" was instantly recognizable. NBC decided to ride that wave of popularity by creating The Gary Coleman Show, a Saturday morning cartoon where Coleman voiced an angel named Andy LeBeau, sent to Earth to help children. On paper, it sounded wholesome and marketable. In practice, it was awkward and uninspired. The show ditched everything audiences loved about Coleman, the sass, the comedic timing, the charm, and replaced it with a preachy, moralizing angel who solved kids' problems in 22 minutes. Plots were predictable. Andy would appear, dispense advice, thwart a bumbling villain, and vanish again. Critics accused NBC of exploiting Coleman's fame without giving him real material. The animation, handled by Hanna-Barbera, was generic and cheaply produced, recycling backgrounds and character designs. Behind the scenes, Coleman himself wasn't thrilled. By then, he was already dealing with family conflicts and struggles over his career choices. The audience reaction was tepid. Kids who adored Coleman on TV weren't interested in watching him float around with wings, and ratings tanked almost immediately. NBC canceled the show after a single season. Looking back, The Gary Coleman Show is a sad example of how networks misunderstood what made a star appealing. Instead of leaning into Coleman's natural wit, they sanitized him into a bland moral figure. It's remembered today less as a cartoon and more as an odd footnote in the troubled career of a child actor who deserved better. The Dukes, 1983. When The Dukes of Hazzard became a primetime hit, CBS tried to stretch its brand into Saturday mornings. The result was The Dukes, an animated series that shrank the show's wild stunts and southern charm into a kid-friendly cartoon. Bo, Luke, and Daisy Duke raced across the globe in the General Lee, while Boss Hogg and Sheriff Roscoe pursued them. The concept was already shaky. Instead of the rural good old boy mischief fans loved, the cartoon sent the Dukes into international race competitions that felt more like a watered-down version of wacky races. The familiar characters were there, but their rebellious edge was replaced with slapstick antics and cheesy moral lessons. Behind the scenes, production was complicated by a cast dispute. At the time, Dukes of Hazzard actors Tom Wopat and John Schneider were locked in a contract fight with CBS, so the first season of the cartoon featured Coy and Vance Duke instead of Bo and Luke. Fans were furious, Ratings plummeted, and the show limped along until the original actors returned. But by then, the damage was done. Animation costs were kept low, resulting in stiff movements and reused driving sequences. Critics blasted it as uninspired and a poor imitation of the real thing. Kids who tuned in expecting car chases and daring stunts instead got repetitive race plots with none of the charm. After 2 short seasons, the Dukes screeched to a halt, leaving almost no cultural footprint. Today, it's remembered only by hardcore Dukes of Hazzard fans as one of the franchise's most forgettable spin-offs. Laverne and Shirley in the Army, 1981. Following the success of Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, ABC believed their sitcom stars could work as cartoon characters too. Thus came Laverne and Shirley in the Army, where the beloved sitcom duo enlisted in the U.S. Army alongside an anthropomorphic pig named Sergeant Squealy. The premise alone felt forced. Instead of the witty banter and working-class humor that made Laverne and Shirley a hit, the cartoon reduced them to slapstick stereotypes. Episodes revolved around wacky military training, bumbling officers, and contrived hijinks that bore little resemblance to the charm of the original series. Behind the scenes, Cindy Williams, who played Shirley, left the live-action series during this period. For the cartoon, both she and Penny Marshall lent their voices at first, but scheduling conflicts and creative fatigue meant their enthusiasm waned quickly. By season 2, the title shifted to Laverne and Shirley with the Fonz, desperately trying to revive interest by adding Fonzie and his dog, Mr. Cool. Critics were not impressed. Animation was subpar, jokes fell flat, and even young viewers recognized that the show lacked heart. Ratings were poor, and ABC quietly dropped it after just 2 seasons. Its legacy? A stark reminder that not every sitcom translates to animation. What made Laverne and Shirley lovable, chemistry, realism, and adult humor, simply didn't survive the leap to Saturday mornings. Instead, it became another entry in the long list of sitcom-to-cartoon experiments that fell flat. Chuck Norris, Karate Kommandos, 1986. By the mid-1980s, Chuck Norris was a bona fide action star. With hits like Missing in Action and Code of Silence, his name carried weight in theaters. So when Ruby Spears Productions developed Chuck Norris, Karate Kommandos, for Saturday mornings, executives imagined a blockbuster franchise combining martial arts, patriotism, and toy sales. The result, however, was a spectacular flop. The show featured Norris as the leader of a government-backed strike team called the Karate Kommandos. Together, they fought an evil organization known as the Claw. Each episode began with live-action footage of Norris delivering a short introduction before cutting into the animated story. It seemed designed to ride the wave of G.I. Joe and He-Man, where action and moral lessons combined into toy-selling machines. But the execution was clumsy. Animation was cheap, plots formulaic, and villains laughably one-dimensional. Episodes leaned heavily on recycled martial arts cliches, ninja ambushes, stolen technology, and evil masterminds twirling their mustaches. Children found the show oddly stiff compared to flashier, better animated competitors. Behind the scenes, production was rushed to meet syndication deadlines, leaving little time for polish. Norris himself had limited involvement beyond lending his likeness and recording intros, and his stoic delivery often felt out of place. Ratings tanked almost immediately. Only 5 episodes aired before the series was pulled from rotation. While Chuck Norris's reputation as an action icon endured, Karate Kommandos is remembered today as an embarrassing detour. It failed to capture either the intensity of his films or the charm of other animated action series. Instead, it faded quickly, resurfacing only as a trivia item in discussions of failed celebrity cartoons. Hammerman, 1991. If there's one cartoon that symbolizes early 90s excess, it's Hammerman. At the height of MC Hammer's fame, when You Can't Touch This dominated radios and parachute pants-filled closets, ABC tried to transform the rapper into a Saturday morning superhero. The premise? Hammer received magic shoes that gave him the power to fight crime and spread positive messages. The result was unintentionally hilarious. Each episode opened with a live-action MC Hammer introducing the cartoon, which then shifted to his animated alter ego battling villains through dance moves. Storylines were paper-thin. Hammer foiled thieves, bullies, or corrupt business people, all while breaking into song and rapping advice. Critics eviscerated it. Animation was clunky, dialogue wooden, and the moral lessons felt shoehorned. Even young fans who adored Hammer's music weren't buying the cartoon. Ratings nosedived almost immediately, and ABC canceled it after a single season. Behind the scenes, Hammer himself was stretched thin, juggling world tours, endorsements, and mounting financial troubles. His limited involvement left creative control to producers who leaned into gimmicks rather than crafting real stories. When Hammer's music career began declining shortly after, Hammerman quickly became a relic of his overexposed brand. Today, it's remembered mostly as a punchline. Clips circulate online as proof of how absurd celebrity-driven cartoons could get. Hammer's music still holds a nostalgic place in pop culture, but Hammerman reminds us that even megastars can flop when reduced to half-baked Saturday morning gimmicks. The New Archies, 1987. The Archie comics had been a staple of American pop culture since the 1940s, with multiple animated adaptations throughout the decades. But in 1987, NBC tried a risky twist. The New Archies, which reimagined Archie, Betty, Veronica, and Jughead as pre-teens navigating junior high. The goal was to make the franchise relevant to a new generation. Instead, it alienated both old fans and new viewers. By stripping away the charm of the classic teenage gang and placing them in middle school, the show lost the playful, romantic tension that had defined Archie comics for decades. Storylines were overly sanitized, focusing on typical schoolyard squabbles and watered-down morality. Lessons? The animation was mediocre, and the new character designs, complete with 80s fashion and hairstyles, aged poorly almost immediately. Critics accused NBC of misunderstanding what made Archie work, timeless characters caught in comedic but relatable teenage dilemmas. Fans of the comics rejected the reboot, while kids unfamiliar with Archie simply weren't hooked. Behind the scenes, the show faced heavy competition from trendier cartoons like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Without merchandise to back it up or compelling plots to differentiate it, the New Archies faded fast. It lasted only a single season before disappearing into syndication obscurity. Its legacy is bittersweet. While Archie's universe would later thrive in live-action adaptations like Riverdale, this cartoon remains one of the franchise's weakest outings. It serves as proof that tinkering too much with a classic formula can strip away everything audiences loved in the first place. The Brady Kids, 1972 to 1974. At the height of the Brady Bunch's popularity, ABC decided to cash in by turning America's favorite blended family into a Saturday morning cartoon. Thus came the Brady Kids, produced by Filmation. The 6 Brady children, Greg, Marcia, Peter, Jan, Bobby, and Cindy, returned, voiced by their live-action counterparts. On paper, it seemed like a sure hit. But the cartoon immediately stumbled. Instead of focusing on family antics that mirrored the sitcom, the Brady Kids plunged into bizarre, fantastical adventures. They befriended talking animals, built time machines, and even crossed paths with superheroes like Wonder Woman and Superman. For fans expecting a faithful adaptation of the beloved sitcom, the tonal whiplash was confusing. Behind the scenes, the problems piled up. Robert Reed and Florence Henderson, who played the Brady parents, refused to participate, leaving the kids adrift without parental figures. Production quality was thin, with Filmation's trademark cost-cutting leading to stiff animation and recycled sequences. Critics slammed it as a hollow cash grab. Kids who loved the live-action Brady Bunch weren't impressed by cartoon versions thrust into outlandish plots. Ratings lagged, and after 2 seasons, the show quietly faded away. Its legacy is one of missed opportunity. Instead of capturing the humor and warmth that made the Bradys iconic, the cartoon cheapened them into gimmicky adventures. Today, the Brady Kids is remembered mainly as another entry in a long list of sitcoms awkwardly forced into Saturday morning cartoons. Gilligan's Planet, 1982 to 1983. Few shows have been milked for as many spin-offs as Gilligan's Island. After the original series ended in 1967, audiences got TV movies, reunion specials, and even a cartoon in the early 70s titled The New Adventures of Gilligan. But the strangest, and perhaps weakest, spin-off came in 1982 with Gilligan's Planet. The premise was absurd. The castaways build a spaceship and end up stranded on an alien world. Suddenly, Gilligan, the skipper, and the rest of the crew were battling space monsters, futuristic gadgets, and cosmic hijinks. The tropical island charm that had anchored the original series was completely gone. While most of the original cast returned to voice their characters, even their presence couldn't save the show. Critics mocked the outlandish premise, with one reviewer quipping, "It took Gilligan 20 years to get off the island, only to end up lost again, this time in outer space." Behind the scenes, Filmation once again cut corners on animation. Backgrounds were sparse, character movements stiff, and comedic timing fell flat. Kids tuning in for space adventures had better options, like He-Man or Thundar the Barbarian. Ratings were weak, and the show lasted only one season. Today, Gilligan's Planet is remembered as the final gasp of a franchise that refused to die. Instead of reinventing itself successfully, it pushed the castaways into ridiculous territory, proving that not every sitcom can, or should, be rebooted endlessly. The Fonz and the Happy Days Gang, 1980 to 1981. By the late 1970s, Happy Days was a cultural juggernaut. Fonzie's leather jacket was iconic, his "I" catchphrase everywhere. ABC and Hanna-Barbera saw an opportunity. If kids loved Fonzie in primetime, surely they'd love him in Saturday morning cartoons. Thus, the Fonz and the Happy Days Gang was born. The setup? Fonzie, Richie, Ralph Malph, and a new character named Cupcake, a futuristic girl with time travel powers, tumbled through history in a malfunctioning time machine, trying to return home. Along for the ride was Mr. Cool, Fonzie's talking dog. It was as strange as it sounds. Instead of sitcom humor about teenagers in the 1950s, the show became a wacky time travel adventure filled with historical figures, slapstick comedy, and morality lessons. The familiar dynamic of Happy Days was completely lost. Behind the scenes, Henry Winkler and Ron Howard lent their voices, but enthusiasm was low. Critics accused the show of butchering a beloved franchise for quick cash. The animation was clunky, the plots repetitive, and Cupcake was derided as an unnecessary attempt to freshen up the gang. Kids weren't buying it. Competing shows like Scooby-Doo and Super Friends were far more appealing, leaving the Fonz and the Happy Days Gang struggling in the ratings. After just one season, ABC pulled the plug. Its legacy remains as one of the oddest spin-offs in cartoon history, a reminder that not even the coolest TV character of the 70s could save a half-baked time travel gimmick. The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jeckle, 1979 to 1980. Mighty Mouse had been a hero of animation since the 1940s. But by the late 70s, CBS attempted to revive him for a new generation. The result was The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jeckle, which paired the classic superhero rodent with the wisecracking magpies. On the surface, it looked like a nostalgic return. In reality, it fell flat. The show recycled the original characters, but stripped away much of their charm. Mighty Mouse's adventures were watered down into predictable good versus evil plots, while Heckle and Jeckle's antics leaned on repetitive slapstick instead of the witty banter they were once known for. The animation quality was notably poor, with stiff movement and obvious shortcuts. Behind the scenes, CBS demanded a safer tone, removing the edge that had once made Heckle and Jeckle controversial, yet engaging. Longtime fans found the new material dull, while children raised on flashier cartoons like Super Friends or Scooby-Doo weren't interested in these recycled relics. Ratings plummeted, and critics dismissed the series as a pale imitation of its predecessors. Within a year, CBS canceled it, leaving only a handful of episodes to circulate in syndication. Its legacy is bittersweet. While Mighty Mouse would later find renewed life in the critically acclaimed Mighty Mouse: The New Adventures. In 1987, this earlier reboot is remembered as a creative misstep that showed how nostalgia alone can't save a poorly executed revival. The Skatebirds, 1977 to 1979. In the late 70s, Hanna-Barbera was scrambling to keep its Saturday morning dominance alive. Their solution? The Skatebirds, a live-action/animated hybrid that combined costumed performers in giant bird suits with animated segments featuring wacky characters like Woofer and Whimper and the Robotic Stooges. The gimmick? Roller skates? The Skatebirds were clearly modeled after the Banana Splits, but with far less charm. The live-action bird characters were unsettling rather than fun, and their skits were painfully unfunny. The animated segments were no better, stitched together with recycled gags and cheap animation. Behind the scenes, Hanna-Barbera hoped to create a cross-promotional juggernaut, complete with toys and touring appearances, but children found the giant bird costumes creepy, and critics lambasted the show for being derivative and uninspired. Ratings never took off, and within 2 years, the Skatebirds disappeared from schedules. In later decades, fans of obscure cartoons have resurrected clips online, often remarking on how bizarre the concept was. Instead of being remembered as another Banana Splits, it became a cautionary example of Hanna-Barbera running out of fresh ideas in the late 70s. The Thing, 1979. Marvel Comics' Fantastic Four had already gained animated adaptations, but in 1979, NBC decided to give Ben Grimm, better known as The Thing, his own Saturday morning spotlight. The result, however, was baffling. Instead of sticking to the original comics, The Thing reimagined the orange rock-skinned hero as a nerdy teenager named Benji Grimm, who transformed into The Thing by clashing 2 magic rings together. Fans of Marvel were appalled. The gritty, tragic depth of the comic book character was erased, replaced with hokey slapstick and high school antics. Instead of cosmic battles, Benji fought bullies, local crooks, and goofy villains in plots that felt closer to Archie than Fantastic Four. Behind the scenes, producers were under pressure to kid-proof the story, but in doing so, they stripped away everything that made The Thing compelling. Marvel itself distanced from the show, recognizing how far it strayed from the source material. Critics and comic fans tore it apart, calling it one of the worst adaptations of all time. Ratings were low, and the show was quietly shelved after its first season. Today, The Thing stands as one of Marvel's most notorious missteps in animation, a reminder of how poorly beloved characters can fare when networks underestimate their audience. Saturday morning once promised magic, but as these forgotten flops show, not every cartoon could capture children's hearts. Some were too weird, others too cheap, and many simply misunderstood what audiences wanted. Which of these do you remember, or had you forgotten them all? Like, subscribe, and share your own Saturday morning memories below.